the race.
Okay, stay out.
Not really sure what he was trying to do with that.
Hello there and welcome along to the F1 Weekend Debrief, where we're reflecting on the 2019 Belgian Grand Prix. Formula One's technical consultant Rob Smedley is with us as ever, and over the next half hour or so we'll be reflecting on how Ferrari won their first race of the season, where Mercedes might have caught them, and how Red Bull's rookie went from 17th on the grid to 5th at the end of the race. But first of all, to the events of Saturday afternoon, when, following an accident in the Formula 2 feature race, French driver Antoine Hubert sadly lost his life. Rob, we know motorsport is dangerous, but this was a shocking eventuality for everybody.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Ted, we've got to talk about a young 22-year-old man who's lost his life. You know, and our thoughts are with, you know, deepest sympathies to him and his family, of course. But you know, it's motor racing is dangerous, and the relentless pursuit of safety can never stop. You know, this is an accident that's shown us that there are still accidents out there that can cause fatalities, and therefore at all levels of motor racing, you know, we have to keep pursuing the boundaries of safety and keep pushing for it.
Let's talk a little bit about Antoine and the talent he had. He was known as one of the 4 French musketeers because he, Esteban Ocon, Charles Leclerc and Pierre Gasly all started in karting at more or less the same race back in the sort of mid-2000s, and he was the reigning GP3 champion as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was reigning GP3. You know, this was his first season in Formula 2, and you know, he'd had a couple of good wins as well in Formula 2, which is on your debut season is always, you know, shows that he was a very handy driver. You know, from everything that I know about him, he was very analytical. He was able to understand the data and the technicalities of racing very well. You know, and all the guys down at Renault, the people who I've spoken to, they've only, you know, had good things to say about him.
Now, of course, every accident in Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 is analysed to see if lessons can be learnt, and the FIA have launched an investigation following the events of Saturday afternoon. What will they be looking at?
The main thing that the FIA will do is they'll reconstruct the accident itself and look at the loads that have gone into you know, the 2 cars and the loads that have gone into Antoine's car and then have been imparted into him. So it's about reconstructing first of all the load paths and the energy, and then what the next stage is to look at whether or not there's anything you can do with either monocoque safety, with driver safety, with the helmets, with anything like that. Where you can help to dissipate, to spread that energy so that it's not going into the driver.
Of course, you mentioned the other car. Hubert was hit by the car of Juan Manuel Correa, who's at this point still in hospital, recovering from some surgery. He broke both his legs, so we wish him the best for his recovery as well. But is it the case that, you know, the energy involved, some accidents are just not survivable?
Yes, I think unfortunately that is the case. You know, and certainly with the technology that we have today and the materials that we have today available to us, some accidents are very, very difficult to survive. And an accident like this, a lateral accident, where one car T-bones another, you know, at very, very high speed, then the energy that you're trying to dissipate via the car and not into the driver is very, very difficult to do. Extremely difficult to do.
Yes, indeed, doubtless lessons will be learned, but the motorsport world lost a bright star on the weekend, Antoine Hubert, at the age of just 22. So on Sunday, Formula One was very much racing for Antoine, and it was apt perhaps that it was his friend Charles Leclerc who won the race, getting his first win in Formula One, and crucially, Rob, Ferrari's first win of 2019.
Yeah, it's been a while coming, hasn't it? It's September of 2019 and we've just had the first win. They certainly should have had a few more on the board than they've got now. But
well, Leclerc should have had a few more. There was Baku, Bahrain, Germany, when he went off on the ice rink. He could have won that.
Yeah. There's ones that definitely got away, and they know that, which is why I think they were just so desperate and then happy, and rightly so, to get the first one on the board here in Spa. Spa's definitely a circuit that suited their car. It's a circuit that rewards a low drag package that we know by this point in the season that Ferrari is a much lower drag than Mercedes. So in Sector 1 and Sector 3, if you've got low drag, then you can capitalise on that in those sectors and have a fast race car around the Belgian circuit. But Ferrari had to do that. We've gone to circuits before where they've had a good car and a good package and they haven't capitalised, they haven't converted. They've definitely done that here.
Think back to Felipe Massa's first win, your first win with Ferrari, in a Ferrari. What kind of breakthrough is it for a driver?
Well, it wasn't my first win as a race engineer.
No, or you'd won before, yeah.
But Felipe's first win as a driver, especially a young driver who's coming through and is being thrust into the spotlight that is Ferrari, I think that it just kind of unlocks a great deal of confidence. It just gives them that confidence. I think the key is that people think either driving a race to either sixth position or even third position is something very different to driving a race to first position. And in fact, once you've done it, you realise it's not. It's exactly the same thing. You just have to do exactly the same process. And if you've got a good enough car and you're good enough on the day, then you will win that race. And once you've done that, it gives you a great deal of confidence that you can carry on doing. And that's what's going to happen with Charles now.
Okay, so what, mentally it'll make it a bit easier for Leclerc now? Or
Yeah.
knowing he can do it?
Yeah,
last?
definitely.
Okay.
If he knows that he can do it, if he knows that he can get into the car and he's able to do it, because now he's done it, it makes a huge difference mentally for him.
All right, what about Sebastian Vettel? He knows what it's like to win for Ferrari, but why did he struggle on the weekend?
Well, I mean, what he said is that he couldn't get the setup right, or he couldn't get the balance of the car right, more precisely. He was struggling with the rear end. If you struggle with the rear end, then in Sector 2, at least in Spa, which is very, very twisty, you know, it's very flowing and twisty, but you've got to have a good rear end, especially in those high-speed kinks. If you haven't got that, then he's probably going to be a bit spooked by it, and he was. I mean, Charles was 7/10 faster in qualifying, and there's definitely not 7/10 between the two drivers. So definitely Sebastian wasn't happy with the car.
Well, it seems Charles Leclerc wasn't prepared to be beaten on Sunday, but Mercedes gave it a very good go. We're going to relocate, take a closer look at how they might have done that. But in the meantime, this is how it all played out on track and on team radio.
And let Charles buy his lap.
So that's Ferrari making a very bold strategic call to say Charles Leclerc is going to get past, is going to retake the lead. So Hamilton goes left and he's going to have to go the long way around the first part of the chicane, but he'll get the inside line if he can stay wheel to wheel, which he can't. Now switches back, will get DRS, and can he mount a challenge?
He's going to walk over us.
Here he comes, Lewis Hamilton. He pulls out alongside Sebastian Vettel. He pulls ahead. Final lap of this race. Charles Leclerc leads. Lewis Hamilton is second. It's 1.5 seconds.
Yes.
Congratulations. Yes.
Well done.
This one is long, but
Maybe one more lap, we would have had it.
Yes, here we are. We've moved into our Race Watch Strategy Hub, where, Rob, we've got the exact same computer program that the team strategists have at their disposal on the pit wall. This is good. I might get a copy off you later for my laptop. Explain what we're looking at here. This is laps completed, and this is time on that axis. And it shows at various points in the race what's already happened and then the prediction of what's going to happen. So where are we now?
This is now at lap 17. So we've got the cursor at lap 17. So what's happened is, being the safety car, you can see that Charles, who's the red dotted line, is leading the race. Sebastian, who is the bold red line, has already stopped, and the two Mercedes have gone on. So we just wanted to get to a point in the race where something significant had happened, such as Sebastian stopping, and you can see that what's happening is the race trace is predicting that Sebastian is going to stay out. He's undercut all the other cars, which we know wasn't the case, and there's reasons for that. Was because Sebastian had higher degradation than what Charles had. But in the model here, it's predicting that Sebastian's going to go on to do a one-stop and he's going to win the race.
And he's going to win, not by much from Leclerc with the dotted line, but clearly ahead of the two Mercedes as well. Right, so that was the prediction.
So that was the prediction, because the paces We're still a little bit based on an aggregate of what's gone on here, and also the qualifying pace. So it thinks that the Mercedes is significantly slower than the Ferrari. Not significantly slower. You can see that these lines of the Ferrari in red and the Mercedes in blue aren't diverging too much. But it's enough that Ferrari's going to win the race at this point.
All right, let's simplify it a bit. If we just clear it up so we get rid of some of the other lines and we have a look at what we're seeing now. Should I move it on?
Yeah, if you move it on now, Ted, to lap 24.
There we go.
And then what you've got now is so Sebastian stopped, as he'd already done. We've gone forward in time, and now the other cars have stopped. So all of this has happened. Let's remember that all this has happened, and the prediction's showing something quite significant now for race strategy in terms of tactics. So you can see that Sebastian, who stopped early, has undercut everybody. That's what it was predicting before, if you remember, at lap 17. And that's what actually happened. So Charles is now motoring up behind him, and you can see at this point it's predicting that Charles is going to motor up behind him, he's going to come behind him, and then he's going to get past very quickly. Of course he is, their teammates, they're in two different strategies. Significantly, Lewis in the solid blue line, he's going to come up behind him as well. So he's going to come up behind Sebastian, and he's going to spend some laps behind him. What that's going to do for Lewis is it's going to give him a bit of a hard time getting past, which is going to drag him away from that pursuit of catching Charles.
Okay, so Ferrari can see that Vettel's going to lose a place to Hamilton in the end anyway, so they decide they might as well use him tactically. If we go through to lap 37 now, explain how they did that.
So this is exactly what's happened. So what was being predicted has happened. So you can see that Lewis in the solid blue line is motored up behind Sebastian here. Sebastian's let Charles past the dotted red line, as we saw in the race. But now, significantly, Lewis has spent 5 laps stuck behind Sebastian, and that's dragged him away from Charles, who's motoring on his own.
And look, that's a lovely cushion there that Leclerc has got. The cushion that Vettel made for him.
That's the cushion that they were able to deploy by leaving Sebastian out. And we're predicting that actually Lewis is never going to get on terms with Charles here towards the end of the race. If we just fast forward towards the end of the race, in fact, Lewis did get on terms because he was significantly quicker, but also because we see Charles's lap times tailing off here. I think there's something significant here, Ted, if we're able to look at the head-to-head. So this chart here is a new chart, and what we're showing is the gap of Lewis here behind Charles. So if you look at the first stint, it's always around about this 3.5, 4 seconds.
Okay, so we're talking about that time cushion. So if you imagine a nice big green plump cushion is what you want. When it starts to get a bit narrow, that's the cars getting much closer together.
That's the cars. So as these bars go down, it means that Lewis is getting much closer to Charles. This is always the gap. So when he comes out the pits, we can see that he's around about 7 seconds behind. He catches him significantly, and he continues to catch him. But then what happens? He gets stuck behind Sebastian, and he then gets dragged back. So the gap goes from around about 4 seconds and gets dragged back up to 7 seconds. Let's have a look what would have happened had Sebastian not been in the way. So Lewis would have continued at this trajectory here, and he would have continued to catch him, and around about lap 35, you can see that gap would have come down to 0, and he would have had 9 laps to battle against Charles.
Okay, very clever. That's what Ferrari used. They saw it all coming. Yes, Vettel, it didn't work out for him, finished P4, but still, it's what made Leclerc's race. Right, well, sadly for Max Verstappen, his engineers on the Red Bull pit stand didn't need that clever strategy program to figure out what was going to happen in his race, because, Rob, it was over before it, well, just after it started. And what did you make of this? I don't know, impetuous? He got a bit of a bad start, got tangled up with Kimi Raikkonen, and did he really need to press it and try to overtake the Sauber at La Source?
I don't think he's braked particularly. He hasn't braked too late here, to be honest. He's braked normally. He hasn't locked up. There's nothing particularly wrong with that. Kimi hasn't seen him. I think the FIA have made the right decision. It was a 50-50 incident. And then, you know, coming down into Eau Rouge now, you know, Max obviously realises that there's damage with the car. If you listen, you can hear him lifting out, and he's trying to tiptoe through there. I think he obviously doesn't realise the amount of damage he's got on his car. He's just trying to get it back to the pits in order to see whether or not he can salvage anything out of a rather dubious start to the race.
But look at the front left here. Bang. I mean, we can see that that steering's broken.
You can because you're about a metre higher than he is.
Yeah, but what's he doing piling into Eau Rouge with broken steering?
He's not piling into Eau Rouge. He goes through there with quite a lot of caution for a Formula One driver, to be honest. He lifts very, very early. He just tries to get through there. He doesn't realise the extent of the damage. His one focus there is to get back safely and see if he can salvage something from the race.
Okay, well, he couldn't, I suppose, and ended up in the wall, which is unusual for Max Verstappen this season. But he had a new teammate this weekend who had a good race indeed. Alexander Albon, who started P17 with an engine change that Red Bull did deliberately, so said Helmut Marko, take the pressure off him. Did that surprise you a bit?
A little bit, yeah. I think you want to, he needs to start to not feel that pressure in a negative way, but feel the pressure anyway that will come to him from the outset. Being in a top team, being in that environment, it's part and parcel of what you've got to do. For the drivers, for the engineers, for the mechanics, everybody's got to be able to withstand that pressure. So the sooner that Alexander can get on terms with it, the better.
Okay, and you can probably see behind us, he made he made quite a few great overtakes. This one on Ricciardo, having been crowded out, goes on the inside and then takes him on the outside. Not many people do that to Ricciardo.
No, got the switch back. Obviously he's in it. We've got to remember that Alexander is in a much quicker car.
And younger, softer tyres on Ricciardo.
And younger, softer tyres. I think Daniel had been out for about 150 laps at that point.
Yeah, and that one on Perez.
Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it? That was. I think he's a brave lad. He's come into Formula One. He's had a lot of accolades. Red Bull were desperate to get him in one of their seats, in the junior seat this year. And they're not usually desperate to get any driver in a seat unless he's very, very good. So he is very good. And the main thing is whether he can hit the ground running, which I think he has done, certainly in Spa. He needs 2 or 3 more races under his belt, and then you can say, right, he's got the momentum behind him now, and he starts to build from there.
Okay, well, it was a great race for Alexander Albon. As we found out after the race, it was made even harder because the team couldn't hear him on the radio.
Well done, Alex. That was a really strong dive today. Really very good. P5 from the back of the grid. Great start. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Still some work to do though, for sure.
Be easy when we can hear you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent stuff, Alex. Good passes, especially around turn 8, turn 9. That was good. Yeah, I couldn't hear you at all on circuit with your radio, so we'll get that sorted.
Well, Alex Albon ended up P5, but that position was held for most of the race by McLaren's Lando Norris, who was set for his Formula One career best finish in 5th before this happened. And believe me, we've had to do quite a bit of bleeping on this one.
I'm losing power, it's going.
Okay, keep going, safety car. Keep going for now,
I can't, it's broken! It's broken! Anti-stall. It's off.
Okay, we're over the line, so just pull over to one side, please. Pull over to one side and go to P1, pause for 4 seconds, go to P0. I'm so sorry.
Oh, poor Lando. I felt sorry for him with the in the middle of it.
Yeah, and I just wonder what the engineer was shouting safety car for. That was a phantom safety car in the middle of all that as well. But I mean, seriously, it's devastating for the lad, isn't it? He'd done a really good race. I think what you're looking at there, especially for a midfield team and coming back to my time at Williams, I remember, say, 2015, 2016, the midfield utopia is to be in front of the rest of the midfield, which is kind of what Renault were hoping for this year. Yeah. And McLaren is slowly moving towards that. This race, there was just kind of a race on their own, and they're the best racers. They look kind of boring from the outside, but you pick up all the points, and definitely McLaren are getting there now. And Lando had driven a great race. He was 5th. He was going to be 5th quite easily. So to have that taken away from him, it's devastating. It
is, and a double engine problem from McLaren, with Carlos Sainz retiring before the race really got going as well. So I'm sure they'll want to fix that with Renault. Instead, Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll took advantage. Double points finish for Racing Point. What is it about the Silverstone-based team? Jordan, you were there, then Force India, and now Racing Point. They seem to have the secret setup sheets for how to do well at Spa in a safe somewhere.
Well, yeah, you're quite right, and if I knew, then I'd be able to tell you. I don't. It's something that we spent some time analysing whilst I was at other teams. Definitely, they you know, part of the package that they bring there is low drag. That's 100% clear, because they go very, very quickly in sector 1 and sector 3, which is all about having low drag. But they also maintain a reasonable pace through sector 2 as well. So, you know, there's 100% they bring. They take a lot of drag off the car, probably more so than the other teams. But in doing so, they don't lose so much in sector 2, which is tight and twisty, where you need a lot of downforce. So they've got some secrets there, and they do it year in, year out as well. It's not a freak occurrence.
Indeed, and it was a good day as well for Toro Rosso. Both cars in the points as well as the racing points. Kvyat 7th and Gasly P9, and that will be good for Gasly on a hard day personally for him, his friend of Antoine Hubert, of course, and a hard day professionally, having been dumped out of Red Bull.
Yeah, definitely. I was pleased to see Pierre up there in P9. I think Daniel, as we know, is definitely, you know, he's a driver who is going through a renaissance. He's a driver who's having a, you know, he's come back and he's much stronger. He's much more of a complete package. We've said that many times this year. So for him to get to P7, that's fairly normal, what we'd expect of him. For Pierre, in the difficult circumstances, I mean, more so than getting sacked, you've just lost your mate, you know, the day before. So he's had to get his head in gear, and he's done a good job. And I hope now that, you know, him and Daniel are able to have a really close battle towards the end of the season. Yeah,
indeed so. But it was also a very disappointing race for Haas. We've seen that before, but we haven't seen such a disappointing race for Alfa Romeo Sauber for quite a while. We saw what happened with Kimi Raikkonen with Max Verstappen early on. That damaged his car. But then there was this rather scary crash for Giovinazzi while he was in a points-paying position towards the end of the race.
Antonio, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Ouchie. And at a time when you've got Nico Hülkenberg on the market for next year, Giovinazzi can't afford to be making those kind of mistakes.
No, not really. I mean, we haven't heard anything about where that mistake come from, but, you know, whether or not there was something that has led him into that. But definitely that's quite a costly mistake. You know, they were going to be 8th, I think, with Lando's issues. They would have picked up P8. Minimum, so, you know, it's a bit of a shame for the lad. I do feel for him, you know, because everybody makes mistakes, but it's just a costly one.
Okay, well, the silver lining for those drivers is that the next race is Monza this weekend. Ah, sì, bello, grazie. The Italian Grand Prix, is that right? More or less.
Yeah,
a favourite for, well, for us, for the fans, for the drivers as well. Ferrari, can we expect the same as Belgium for them?
Definitely. It's a circuit that rewards low drag, as Belgium does. But more importantly, it's a circuit that doesn't reward or rewards even less downforce. So it's very well suited to the Ferrari package, and they've got to convert. They've got to capitalise on it.
Okay. Well, once again, we've reached the checkered flag. Rob Smedley, thank you very much for your insights. Italy awaits, and once again, Formula One will be racing in memory of Antoine Hubert.